I was told to make sure my mic was turned on. It seems like it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. All right. Thanks for that great introduction. And thank you, Hong Kong, for hosting me for these last 72 hours. I fly out tomorrow morning, headed for Taiwan. But it's been an amazing couple of days here, and this is going to be my last talk. I've given this talk a couple of different times. I've made some adjustments to it. But I just really wanted to come out here and talk to you a little bit about some of the technologies I've seen firsthand in the labs, some of the directions I think this technology is going to take us, and really get into a dialogue with you about some of the cool things you're doing with these technologies. I've already met one entrepreneur who's actually using blockchain in real-world applications. There are also people in the room that may not even really understand what blockchain is or how it works. And I just want to sort of engage in a dialogue and get into a conversation so that we can identify some opportunities and really chart a course in this future and not just let it happen and unfold to us. But you've already heard a little bit about me and my background. I think that to help you understand like where I'm coming from, we test in PC Magazine 2,500 products every year, largely in our lab in New York City, but also all across the country. These are PCs, these are digital cameras, these are augmented reality systems, software packages, cloud accounting solutions, everything from toys that you buy your kids to business software that you run your Fortune 1000 company with. So I don't actually test all these products. I have people that work for me that are far, far smarter than me that do all of the hard work. But I read everything that they write, and I talk to them about what they're doing, and I talk to them about what the state of the art is. And it's given me great insight into not only the hardware products that are coming out, but also the software products and trends. And the range of products that I'm exposed to is really pretty extraordinary. I mean, I can go out on the bench and see the latest LG smartphone that is, we're testing under NDA, and talk to the analyst who's tested every premium smartphone for the last 10 years about what makes this phone different. And I can talk to our business analysts who are testing customer relationship management software and talk about how the latest update solves these problems but doesn't address these issues. So that's the kind of information. That's what makes my job so fun and so great. But it also gives me an ability to sort of see some trends, see some connections, and see some technologies that I think are really changing the world around us. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So 7 tech trends to watch. I could have done 14, I could have done 21. I blended some of these in because I'm trying to get this into a 30-minute talk. And most importantly, I want to leave some time for that important conversation. And I do know that somebody's got some tough questions for me, but they've been lined up. So 7 tech trends. My next slide shows all of them, but I'm going to skip past it because I don't want to ruin it. There we go. Why did I put all of them on one slide? That should have been at the end. But Internet of Things. Speaking of slides that should be at the end or used to be at the end, when I first started giving talks about technology and the future of technology, the Internet of Things was my ending slide. It was my big finish. It was the thing that I was like dazzling people with, and I was saying, you know what? You're used to internet on your laptop. You just wait. You're going to have it on your cell phone all the time. And people were like, oh, maybe. And I said, no, not even that. You're going to have an internet connection in your refrigerator. You're going to have an internet connection in your TV. Every device in your household is going to be connected to the internet. And what are we going to do with that? I don't even know. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but it's going to happen. And we should start thinking about it. And that was my big finish. Now, that's my opening slide. This is the present. This isn't the future. This is here today. We're testing these products in our lab day after day after day. It's everything from smart home thermostats that can monitor your temperature and set it automatically and controlled by your smartphone. It is connected coffee machines that are connected to the internet for no other reason other than they can charge a little bit more for having it connect to the internet. And we test them in our lab and have to tell people whether or not this is worth the money. A lot of times we say it's not. That this is the world that we're living in now. The challenge is we have all of these connected devices. They have all this connectivity. Some of them provide some real utility. Others are just, the internet's in there for no other reason than it's relatively affordable to do so. But none of the systems really work that well together. Individual manufacturers can build products that can connect to the internet, that will work with your smartphone, but the control systems really leave something to be desired. There are not complete ecosystems that are functional in a way that makes sense to consumers. And that's an opportunity. And a lot of the tech industry is rushing to provide this functionality. And already we're starting to see shakeups in terms of who can provide that functionality. Early days, I would say absolutely Apple is going to own this space. And Apple is definitely a player here. And have made some efforts with iOS to connect these devices. But it's a little disappointing, to be honest, when it actually comes down to managing all those devices. Google has an offering here. They've got apps and services and some devices that work with their platform. But again, very unsatisfying when you get it in the lab and start using it. And then out of nowhere, Amazon showed up with its platform, which I'll talk more about in the future. And I actually think Amazon's best positioned to operate as the command and control network for the smart home and for a lot of these devices. But it's not just the home that the Internet of Things is going to be connecting. It's going to be the enterprise. It's going to be every aspect of our businesses. And there are still problems to be overcome, particularly in the enterprise, and that's in the realm of security. One of the things I talk to people about, we talk about the Internet of Things, we talk about securing the Internet of Things. Part of the problem is securing the devices and the connections themselves. An even bigger problem is just making the devices hardened to outside attack. Last year, a security researcher named Brian Krebs, who's one of the leading security researchers on the internet, security journalists, had his site taken offline by the largest denial of service attack ever in the history of the internet. We all thought that this had to be a state actor, that he had done something to annoy the NSA or the People's Republic of China or some state actor. This is probably when I should say that although the State Department brought me over here, my opinions are my own. I speak for myself. I'm a private citizen. I reserve my own opinions, and not a reflection of the United States government. But it was such a big attack that we thought it had to be state-sponsored. And in the first day, on our site and many other sites, that's what we all reported. We were just anticipating that was what was going to be found out. It turns out it was not a state actor. In fact, it wasn't even a collection of supercomputers or servers. It was the Mirai botnet taking over millions and millions of security cameras, internet-connected security cameras, and home DVRs, TiVos. So TiVos shut down a site that even the largest organizations, Akamai, the largest caching service in the world, couldn't protect themselves against. And it was just because these cameras were too dumb, these cameras were not protected against a relatively basic attack. And that's what happens when you have millions and millions of devices that are built to connect to the internet, but there's no thought given into how to secure these devices. So a lot of these devices, we're trying to figure out in our labs, how do we assess the security implications and security consequences of having all these devices? And it's something we're struggling with, frankly, because it's a whole new thing for us to do, to evaluate connected coffee machines and then evaluate their security. There's no script for that. But we're struggling with it, and whenever I get up in front of a crowd, I make sure the crowd understands that this is a real risk and a real vulnerability and something we have to address if we want to move forward in a secure future. That also plays into smart cities. If we're going to be connecting all of these devices in our homes, and we're going to be connecting increasingly important parts of our city infrastructure, we need to have the same approach to security that we have, or that we should have with our consumer devices. When I think about connected cities, everybody wants to have a connected city, everybody wants to have a smart city. There's really no one definition of what a smart city is. There's a collection of technologies that can enable large numbers of people to live together efficiently and more efficiently when the technology is appropriately deployed. It affects everything from transportation to sewage systems to, to education, to the management of public spaces, to the management of utilities. All of those things wrap into one to themselves. And one of the key enabling technologies that I think we need to pay attention to here is 5G. I know actually in town this week, there was a 5G convention. Qualcomm is in town announcing some new products, which I think might still be under NDA, so I can't talk about them. But the thing that's really heartening to me is that Qualcomm is here in Hong Kong talking about 5G technology. That's the same 5G technology that we're going to use in New York City. It's the same 5G technology we're going to use in London. We've got the opportunity to turn 5G into a global wireless standard where we can have devices that work across the globe in synchronicity for the first time really ever. And everyone in the wireless industry is united in this. Everyone in the hardware industry is united in this. It may still fall apart. The technology isn't done yet. But this is going to be coming online. We're going to have 5G products available for sale within the next 12 months. Handsets and infrastructure are starting to roll out. I find that extraordinarily heartening that we're moving together as an entire planet, really, behind the standard. And it's very exciting to me. In the same time, we've got this tremendous opportunity to connect our cities and make them more efficient. We also have some real fundamental urban problems that we're going to need to solve. The United Nations has looked at our population growth and looked at our cities and said, you know what, in order to support the population in 2050, we're simply going to need to produce a lot more food. If we're going to do that in an efficient way, it probably means we're going to have to produce some of that food inside our cities and not outside of our cities. Cut and save ourselves that transportation cost. That is part of having a smart city too, is managing your food supply, managing your energy supply, managing your transportation. All of those things are going to roll into what we look at as smart cities. And I just think that I like to talk about the food supply issue because it's one of those mundane things that we don't often think about as a natural consequence of connecting our cities. But it's a pretty important thing for the people that are living in our cities. And it's something we definitely need to consider. So augmented reality and virtual reality. Again, this could have been 2 slides. I combined it into one, so I'd have a nice odd number to work with. Has everybody here used a virtual reality system? Like Oculus Rift or PlayStation VR? Interesting. How about augmented reality?
Like drone or?
Drones could be, there will be mixed reality applications for drones, but like Windows HoloLens. Microsoft, I think, is in the building, and I'm sure there's a HoloLens in this building. You should find out if there is and get them to do a demonstration up here. Because we're finally entering the age where virtual reality is coming online in an affordable way. PlayStation VR has been on the market for a while, but this year, just in the last couple of weeks, a whole slate of PC vendors have announced they're going to come out with mixed reality systems based on Microsoft standards. These are going to be gaming systems. Gaming is going to be the first wave of virtual reality systems, but very quickly it's going to move into enterprise applications, educational applications, and what's more exciting for me than even virtual reality is augmented reality. And augmented reality is when you still see the crowd around you, but I've got an AR headset that will actually identify all of your names, recognize your faces, give me your LinkedIn profiles, and tell me the last time I emailed you, so when we are talking later, I'll be able to have a conversation with you in an intelligent way. That application is not science fiction. We have the technologies to do all of those things. And the headsets and hardware are just now coming online. Facebook just announced last week Oculus Go, which is a wireless virtual reality headset that costs $200. At $200, they're looking at trying to get virtual reality in the hands of 1 million people. So we're talking about scale that just didn't exist before in virtual reality. And I think the important thing to remember here is that virtual reality and augmented reality are not just gaming platforms, they're communications channels. They're an entirely new form of media, and they're going to create an entirely new form of storytelling. The same way we've had to adapt the way we tell stories for digital formats, we're going to have to adapt the way we tell stories for virtual reality and for augmented reality. We've already got, General Electric is already using Google Glass, an augmented reality headset that'll let you call up and use your voice command to access information on a tiny little screen that's like about 3 inches from your eye. They tried launching it as a consumer product. Nobody wanted to wear that on their face. But it turns out aircraft engineers who are working with both hands love being able to access the schematics and the instructions of the manuals for the engines that they're working on without having to look it up in a paper manual, without having to look it up on a PC. That's making their engineers 20 or 23% more effective. That's what GE is reporting anyway, just by having that tool in their toolkit. That same type of technology-enabled assistance is going to happen in every industry, and every industry can be affected by it. It's something that is going to be a really big thing this year, at least in the United States, in terms of a consumer product. That's going to create a lot of people creating media for it and a lot of innovation around the platforms. And then when it comes to work, I think augmented reality is going to be really something that's going to be fascinating and really change the way we see the world around us. And if you have a chance to actually get your hands on one of these systems, if you come to New York City, you can stop by our labs. We give tours all the time. I can show you how these systems work. There's an emotional response you have when you put on one of these systems that really can't be underestimated. You're not going to forget that you're in a virtual reality system. You're going to put it on and you're going to see cartoon characters and you're going to see the pixels on the screen and you're going to feel a little disappointment. And then about 45 seconds later, maybe a minute and a half, you start to let go and you start to adapt to the world around you. And you really do have a physical and emotional response to the environment in a way that you just don't with a computer screen. It is very similar to watching a movie and getting lost in the story and having an emotional response. Virtual reality can take you to that same place much, much more quickly, without the narrative necessarily, all just based on the experiential the experience that you're having. And it's something I'm pretty bullish on. Blockchain. I know we have a blockchain entrepreneur here in the audience that could probably explain what blockchain is and why it's important in a much more significant way. But we've been covering blockchain and trying to explain it, trying to wrap our heads around it on the magazine for quite a while now. And the way I've taken to describing it is that blockchain is a system for creating trust where there ordinarily is no trust. It's a system that creates trust without an authority to create that trust, because the trust is embedded in the system. You can call it a universal ledger. In this crowd, I think we've got a lot of finance people, so I think the idea of a universal ledger is pretty easy to understand. For most audiences, I try and make it a little bit more concrete and say, I like this metaphor of transactions being encased in amber, so that once something happens on the blockchain, it's encased in amber and it's there forever. And then more transactions can happen, and those two will get encased in amber. But you can always look back through the chain and see all of the different transactions, all encased in amber, and you trust that everything that's encased in amber can't have changed. And this enables all sorts of things. It enables a whole new way of looking at contracts. Contracts between two people no longer need a legal authority to enforce them because they have a cryptographic record of that transaction and both sides have agreed to it. It can also be used to store value, to be a cryptocurrency, if you will. And this is what most people, when they talk about blockchain, they usually quickly convert it over to Bitcoin, and they instantly say, and I know people ask me all the time, should I buy Bitcoin? Bitcoin's at $5,000, should I buy it? It's up 1,000%. I mean, literally it was up like 3,000%. Rate's gone up, it's doubled in value since the beginning of the year. Should I buy it now? And I always tell them, look, I'm not a financial analyst. I can tell you what to do. But first, if you don't understand what blockchain is, you probably shouldn't buy Bitcoin. And then also, if you're having to ask somebody whether or not you should jump in on Bitcoin, it's probably too late. Like, that means, once you have to ask people you don't even know on the street whether or not you should spend money on something, probably a little bit too late to get in on it. And actually, but I look at it at the same time. I've watched it go up week after week after week. I've also watched it collapse a couple of times. The way I look at it is that there are people who are smarter than me that are following this much more closely. And for them, by all means, they can gamble on Bitcoin and they can make a lot of money. But I do see it as a gamble. And a gamble is just another word for an investment, depending on how much money you have to lose. But I see cryptocurrencies as essentially right now a gamble, although a very promising platform that I think isn't going to go away anytime soon. But the underlying technology under blockchain, while a bit harder to understand and a bit more esoteric, I think is infinitely more powerful. And it's going to be applied in a variety of applications. And it's just one of those core underlying fundamental technologies like the internet, like TCP/IP, a protocol that we can all rally around. And then we will build beautiful things on top of. But that's what I think of when I think of blockchain. So really infinite possibility here. but complicated and hard. Voice recognition systems. So we've had basic speech recognition for a number of years. I remember reviewing Dragon Naturally Speaking in the 90s and being amazed that it could understand my voice and it would have 90% accuracy, which means out of every 10 words it only got one word wrong, which I thought was incredible, and it was incredible for them. We've now pushed voice recognition accuracy up over 99%. That's just the beginning. That's just the gateway technology. With that ability to recognize voices, natural language processing has become a commodity. It's no longer something that companies are even having to work that hard on, because you can license the voice recognition API from Amazon or Apple or Google and use their voice recognition kit to then deliver products and services on top of it. That's a huge change and a huge transition. And what it does is it allows you to build voice recognition systems into all sorts of products. I think that there are going to be so many consumer electronics that we take for granted today as having buttons on them, and in the future they're going to have mics on them. Everything's going to have a microphone, and you're going to assume that there's going to be a voice-driven system in most of your interactions, and just as a default. And that's something that's happening right now. The company that really leapt out ahead in terms of turning this into a commercial product has been Amazon. Apple had Siri long before Amazon. It took some knocks. People didn't necessarily, but the thing about Siri is that you needed to use it on your phone. And if you've got your phone in your hand, ultimately it's almost faster just to type out commands, to control it with your fingers. The interface lent itself to a touch-based interface. The product lent itself to a touch-based interface. Amazon came out with a product without a screen. The only way to interface with the Alexa was using voice. They had one button, you could turn it on and off. But other than that, you had to use your voice. And it didn't try and do everything. And what it did do, sometimes it didn't do great. But everybody that bought an Alexa loved Alexa. It's the most popular product that's come out in the market in years. And now, Amazon's been on the market for 3 years going. It's on its 3rd generation. It's got a whole line of products that it's going to be pushing into American homes this holiday season. People are buying Alexas for every room in their house. When you have an Alexa in every room in your house, all of a sudden, that is your interface to your smart home. That is the interface that's turning your lights on and off. That's the interface that's turning your air conditioning on and off. That is the default. And Amazon has the market penetration, at least in the US. They've been rolling it out slowly internationally. But the truth is, nobody else is rolling it out any faster internationally. You've got companies that are now building Alexa into their devices all across the globe. But Apple still hasn't released its latest home speaker. That's going to come out next month. It's going to be overpriced. It's going to be their 1st generation product. They are far, far behind in voice recognition and personal assistants. Google is a fast follower here. Again, they had a voice recognition system before Amazon had anything. And Google is a little bit more global. But even there, their hardware products are falling behind, and they're following Amazon ultimately. But this voice recognition system is important for voice assistants in the home, but I think it's actually going to affect pretty much every business in the world, really. Because this is, again, it's a situation where this is not just a technology that lets us control our lights without turning the light switch on and off. Voice recognition is going to be a platform. It's going to be a tool for interacting with users. As a media person in a media company, I need to figure out how to deliver products and services using voice platforms instead of using the web. Because increasingly, when people go shopping for a laptop, they're not going to sit down in front of the desktop and type it into Google search and say, what's the best laptop? They're going to sit on the couch and they're going to say, what's the best laptop? And I need to make sure that PC Mag can tell them what the best laptop is in their living room or in their kitchen or anywhere else they have that question. That changes the media industry in a really fundamental way. And I think when you look at a lot of your businesses, you're going to find out it's going to change your businesses as well. So again, very, 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 very disruptive and a key technology. Artificial intelligence. Another conversation is, I think it's written up in my bio. I do a podcast where I interview technology leaders and friends and executives, and whoever else I can get to come by the lab and talk about the future of technology for 45 minutes. And the conversations have been wildly diverse. And I've talked to hardware people and software people and business people, and in every one of those conversations, all on its own, artificial intelligence comes up. Somebody brings up the topic, somebody's got an opinion about it, somebody's afraid of it, somebody's really excited about it, and it comes up and everybody says this is something that's going to shape the future of technology. And when I talk about artificial intelligence, I kind of want to focus it just a little bit and say I'm not necessarily talking about general intelligence. I'm talking about creating a artificial intelligence that can replicate the human mind, where you can have a conversation with the same way we can have a conversation here today. Those are very worthy goals, but they get a little too philosophical for my taste, and they get a little too, they have religious issues, they're a little too soft. When I talk about artificial intelligence, I talk about just this raw processing power, being able to do complex reasoning at a scale that dwarfs a single human's capacity, and then even dwarfs multiple humans' capacity. And that can be, it's a step beyond pure computation, but it doesn't involve consciousness. So if you take consciousness off the table and you just talk about intelligence, about raw reasoning and processing power, it seems pretty clear that we are living in an age that's about to be transformed by artificial intelligence. This is, again, enabled by massive data sets. We've never had data sets like this before. And in order to process these massive data sets, you need to have tools that can work through all of that code, that work through all those inputs. Once you have the large data sets and the computational power and the algorithms, you can start doing some incredible things. And this is the thing that's going to actually drive a lot of innovation. It's going to drive a lot of employment and a lot of disruption. One of the examples I use when I talk about media, and one that's very personal to me, is that there are hundreds of thousands of computer-generated stories that are published every day on the internet. I guarantee you, people in this room have read articles written by computers. Who thinks they've read an article that was written by a computer? Okay, it's about 5. I guarantee you it's more than that. I guarantee you. You just don't realize how good these computers are and just how believable those texts are. Automated Insights is one company, Narrative Science is another, that are publishing stories on the internet right now. And they're basically writing stories. Anything that can be scripted can be automated. Anything that can be broken down into a series of steps can be automated. And this includes a lot of basic journalism. The Associated Press does write-ups of quarterly reports for US companies. So they file their quarterly financials. The Associated Press will write up an article based on their quarterly report. They've been doing this for years. It's a venerable news organization with thousands of reporters. And in an average 3-month period, they're able to get through about 300 quarterly reports, the most important 300 companies to their mind. But it's boring work, and 300 is a small fraction of the total number of companies that are filing. So they signed up with Automated Insights. They worked with them on an algorithm. They inputted the values. They told them what it meant to have profits at this level, set some expectations. And now Automated Insights creates 3,500 quarterly reports for the AEP, stories about quarterly reports. More than 10 times the number of stories that they were able to do with their human reporters, they were able to automate and publish using these AI systems. The scary part is they're able to do that for a cost of less than $1 a story. They're paying less than 50 cents to publish each one of those stories. Now, those stories take at least a day for a human writer to publish. And the computer can crank them out in volume without any real loss in quality. And when you read these things, like those of you that don't think you've read one of these stories, it's because you see things like, oh, the profits were extraordinarily disappointing. And there's all these adjectives and characterizations and context. That doesn't necessarily need a human. That just needs a smarter algorithm. And the language gets popped in, and it's uncanny when you read these things. There's certain tells, usually mistakes. If there's typos, then it probably wasn't written by a computer. So when I'm reading them, I look for those things that are like, bad grammar can go one way or another, but it's usually the mistakes. But I take this to heart because I employ journalists. I do the business I create content myself. But artificial intelligence is powerful enough to disrupt even my industry, white-collar industries. And everyone I've talked to comes in. Some people say there's going to be massive job loss and disruption, but it's okay because we're going to have new jobs. Some people come in and say there's going to be massive job loss and disruption, and it's not okay because we're not going to have new jobs. We're going to need universal basic income in order to compensate. When I push those people about what those new jobs are going to be, they don't usually know. And I don't really know. But it's absolutely going to be an issue. It's absolutely going to be a problem. And this same sequence of events is going to happen industry after industry after industry. And we really don't, I think there's tremendous promise. I was talking to an AI researcher, Vivian Ming, who told me that if you're still doing the same job today that you were doing a year ago in the same way, she can write an AI engine to replace you. That's just what she's built to do. And she sees this as, and the truth of the matter is that efficiency is the ultimate free market accomplishment. I mean, this will raise the quality of life in all sorts of different ways. The ability for computers to analyze X-rays is going to lead to more diagnoses and better medical treatment and lives saved. It also means we probably need fewer X-ray technicians and fewer radiologists. Somehow we're going to have to work with both. But overall, the dawn of tremendous progress. But there are costs and there are consequences and there are disruptions. And I think automation and AI are really the issues that are going to shape our political discourse, or should be shaping our political discourse. And I don't think they get discussed enough, at least not in an intelligent way. So this brings me to my last slide, which is, I think, the most important one, which is none of these trends that I've been describing exist in a vacuum. None of them are, all of them are significant separately. But when you start to combine them and put them together, that's where I think the real opportunities are from a business perspective. Those are where the real opportunities are from a societal perspective. So, when you look at blockchain and the ability to create this trusted network that could scale across, across all of these devices. We have more connected devices on the planet now than we do human beings. We have more connected devices than we have connected humans, unfortunately. We have 2 billion people without connections to the internet, and yet we've got 8 billion connected devices. There's something not right there, and it's going to get, that gap's going to widen before it closes. But blockchain is going to enable some of the secure communication that's going to enable the Internet of Things and smart cities. AI is the thing that's enabling us to create these voice-driven interfaces, to do natural language processing, to become those personal assistants that help us navigate this increasingly complex world. Smart cities are going to be built around the Internet of Things. Without the Internet of Things and without 5G, you can't connect your cities and you can't have complex infrastructure communicating with both the government and the private sector and the citizens all at the same time. And then when it comes to augmented reality, I think about augmented reality as really the window onto our smart cities. I'm looking forward to the day that where you can walk down the street, and I already do this when I go walking on hikes and I look at a house that's in a neighborhood that I really like, and I go, oh, I wonder how much that house costs. I'll open up my phone, I'll look it up on Zillow, and I'll find the last selling price for that particular house. And it'll tell me this is what it's sold for and this is what it's worth. That's amazing. That's incredible. At the same time, I should be able to just hold my phone up, point the camera at that house, have it use the GPS to identify where I am, have it identify the picture of the house to tell me what house it is, and it should be able to just drop an arrow and say, this house is worth this much, and this is who owns it, and here's the real estate agent. And click here if you want to find out more. That's an experience that we should have in any number of different contexts as we walk around the world, and we will when these augmented reality devices come out. And the first generation of augmented reality is already here. You use your cell phone, you hold it up to the world around you. Pretty soon that's going to be something that's a lot more persistent. Something that you wear, it's going to be built into sunglasses, and we're just going to be used to being able to constantly access this digital world that exists in the same place we are, at the same time we are, but can only be perceived through a technological system. So all these technologies really work together, and as they come together, that's where I think the real value gets unlocked. I'm seeing products like in all these categories come into the lab every day. They're not all great. Some of them don't work very well at all. And that keeps me employed because I get to tell people this is what you should buy, this is not what you should buy. And I think I'm still going to be able to do that for a ways going forward. But overall, when you start to add up these technologies and recognizing the threat of AI and recognizing the threat of automation and recognizing that we're building devices that we don't know how to secure, and recognizing the privacy implications of having all this information available in the cloud that we're not really in control of anymore. Even aside from all of that, when I look at this suite of technologies and I look at where we're going as a species, as human beings, and how quickly this technology is being spread across so many people, and I see technologies that are really making people's lives better. And I guess that's what makes me an optimist. But it's not easy. Being an optimist isn't easy, and we've got a lot of work to make sure that this is making all of our lives better. But that's why I come on tours like this, and I love seeing how you guys are using technology and get feedback from you so that I can take those ideas back home with me. But those are my ideas. I want to say thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to your questions. Be nice.
I'll save my difficult questions to the very last. So we have about 15-20 minutes for you to ask questions or share your opinion and get Dan's reaction to it. Go for it.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. So with all these trends that you have just described, maybe can you explain a little bit, and maybe you have touched on a little bit just now, what do you think, in the next 5 to 10 years, what kind of jobs and skills will go down the drain most quickly? And what kind of jobs and skills will be highest in demand? Thank you.
It's a really good question. And I mean, it's funny because I've tried to help. I really want to give a good answer to what are those new jobs? Because I know intuitively we've gone through massive economic disruptions, technological disruptions before. We went through the Industrial Revolution. We used to 70% of the population. We used to require 70% of the population to work in agriculture in order to feed ourselves, and then we no longer do that, and therefore, and it no longer became sustainable. So those jobs moved, and they moved to the cities, and we started building stuff. And there were some upsides to that, and there were some downsides to it. It wasn't necessarily pretty, it wasn't easy, but we got through it. Looking back on it, it seems like a very natural thing, and it all seems like it was a good thing. When I've talked to people in technology about what these new jobs are going to be, and particularly low-skill jobs, the first thing everybody says is education. So more education will be great, and if everybody's just more educated more, then that'll be protection against job loss and irrelevance. And I say, oh, well, what should they be studying? Like programming, right? And because programming, everybody knows if you learn programming, you'll be employed forever. And I've talked to the same people, and they're like, well, actually, no, not programming, because programming can be automated. Programming is the very definition of automation. And programmers already reuse a lot of code, and you can understand how even that can be automated with sufficient artificial intelligence. There really aren't a lot of jobs that are automation-proof. I think you've got to look towards, certainly in the healthcare industry, there's certain care and services that are always going to need to be delivered human to human, because that's essential. But I also think that there's that idea of doing the same job the same way is something we need to internalize and realize that there's an intense competition and need for creativity and for innovation that humans need to feel some pressure in order to protect ourselves against this. I do think that when you look at the transportation industry and driving and self-driving cars, like I really doubt there's going to be as many, and it doesn't have to be absolute. It's not like there's going to be no truck drivers in 20 years. But I think if you took a show of hands here, who thinks there's going to be as many truck drivers in 20 years as there are now? Does anybody think that? I mean, and that's a pretty shocking statement, because we're going to need to move more stuff. It's not like the need for the need's not going to disappear. We're going to have a different way of doing it. And it's going to affect cab drivers. It's going to affect the retail industry. I mean, Amazon is operating shops right now. They're testing shops, big retail stores, where there are no tellers. There's no cashier. Most grocery stores have a lane in the United States that is cashier free. You check yourself out. Amazon doesn't even require you to check yourself out. You just go around the store, it knows who you are, adds it to your Prime account, it manages its own inventory. That's their problem. And they just charge your card. And you just walk out. Like Uber. It's like taking an Uber. And like you don't take your money out. It just automatically happens in the background. That same set of processes is going to roll out industry after industry. And it's going to have lots and lots of consequences.
So we all see in the headlines that AI is going to displace not only blue-collar jobs, but also white-collar jobs. So from your perspective, what are some of the skills that are harder to replace?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Again, I come back to, well, I thought, well, certainly super high-skilled, high education. What about lawyers? I'm like, wait, the legal industry, surely. Yeah, there we go. Surely a computer couldn't take your job.
Yeah, if I may, I'm not the only lawyer. I need to recognize others, my alumni from Chicago Law School. Well, actually, you answered my first question. Being a lawyer, should I be scared or afraid of putting out of their job? And the second question is, for Bitcoin part, have you ever seen any coins recently issued with an actual utility model after, instead of just being a storage as I mentioned? The third one is related to the first one is, have you ever seen any good platform or project recently trying to take on the lawyer's job? The basic reason I come here is I'm scared with the technology. So if some non-lawyers try to do that, why don't I do it in the first place?
Dragon law is right there. So you
okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, I think about, I have one of my best friends is a lawyer, and he does very well for himself, and it always makes me wonder, like, oh, maybe I should be a lawyer. He does very well for himself. And I see the work that he brings home, and I go, oh my God, I can't do that. Like, my mind doesn't work like that. And he does contracts and M&A, and it's a lot of documents moving back and forth. And there's some negotiation, and there's legal text, and you're going one way or going another. I totally think that there are artificial intelligence that can navigate those, do that legal research, and then make recommendations. And then maybe there's humans that need to vet it and approve it finally. But I totally think that AI is properly trained, can just do a lot of the research, do all the research. And then I think that it's not too far to ask them to then do the negotiation. And then you're going to have AIs negotiating with other AIs. So that they go back and forth, and I mean, that's basically what lawyers do. They go back and they make a compromise. So I do see there's some job, litigating, probably not. That's always going to be something we need humans for. But I mean, I think it can go pretty much farther than you will be comfortable with. Sure. And then the middle question, Bitcoin. There's so much gambling going on with Bitcoin right now. There's sort of the separate fork of like smart contracts, which I think does have a lot of utility. It also represents a lot of challenges. Like the technology is still relatively young, and there's so much that depends on the trust in the algorithm as it's built. That it needs to be done right, and it's not trivial to use blockchain in all these applications. But then the Bitcoins, it really is, it's like there's just so much money to be made, it distorts the market. Like there's so much money to be made, the money is being made. I don't know enough about it to make the right bets. It would be a full-time job for me to consult on Bitcoin. And I already have a full-time job.
What do you think is the end game for Bitcoin in terms of the global liquidity and legitimacy?
I think that there will be a blockchain-based currency that continues to exist and that can be used in a variety of real-world situations. I don't think it's going away. I don't know that Bitcoin will be the one that it wins out, I don't know whether Ethereum seems like it's got some more advantages, but I don't know who the winner will be. But I don't think the technology will go away entirely at all. Like I think it's got legs. I just don't feel comfortable telling people like what the value should be or when they should buy in. It's too good an idea to go away, for sure.
Question over there?
Yeah, okay. Actually, yesterday I went to another talk by Mr. Zhu Ming, who's ex-MD at the deputy MD at IMF, and he also said something very scary, in terms of about fintech, because I wasn't really expecting that, and he showed some slides about how the banking revenues would be going very quickly because of fintech. And now, I give you a tough question, which is, can you actually give us some guidance as to what you expect in terms of, for example, when these automation would actually occur in each of these industries, say, in medicine or in banking, whatever, so that we are prepared as to what to do. I mean, it's actually very tough, but I see the trend, but I'm just saying how soon.
Why did he say that it would be you would lose money in fintech? Did he say what was driving his conclusion?
No, he just said that the banking industry would be actually replaced by all the like the blockchain or the type thing, so that the bank is no longer needed, and so that.
I mean, it goes to that, and this is the promise of blockchain. And the other thing, though, when you talk about blockchain, when you wade into the development of the product, there's a lot of ideology that comes with the product. That's built into the way it's constructed. And you're really talking about creating a currency and a trust platform that exists outside the regulatory framework of the world. There's no government that's giving this currency. It's an independent thing, and that becomes really, really appealing to people of a certain political persuasion. So you sort of have to weed that out. And those are people that are saying we shouldn't have these inefficient structures that are collecting rents on what should be very simple financial transactions. And that is a serious threat to the financial industry. Because it represents competition in an entirely new form. So I don't think that blockchain or Bitcoin as it's constructed now is a threat as it's constructed. But it certainly contains the potential to be that. And it just because it can be, if it becomes what it could be, it is a ruthlessly efficient platform. And could be just offer efficiencies at scale that would be extraordinarily disruptive. I don't think it's happening anytime soon, but I'm not a fintech expert.
So how soon these lawyers would actually be really worried?
I mean, I still think, I would say this, I would still go into law, and I would still go into finance if I were in school. But I wouldn't be Costa. I would be trying to come up with new products and services. And this is just the nature of business and competition. There are technologies that will be disruptive and create efficiencies, but there's also business models that will come along and do the same thing. Blockchain is sort of that weird combination of it's a technology, but it's also a little bit of a business. It comes with a set of assumptions and a set of it even comes with its own politics, I would argue, but it comes with a business model attached to it, and it's definitely a threat. But I don't. In the next 5 years, I wouldn't worry about it putting Morgan Stanley out of business.
Then actually, I never use any of these devices, frankly speaking. But I invested in a lot of these devices. So my experience is that it doesn't seem to worry me at all, the loss of jobs or things like that. And somehow it seems to be a tremendous opportunity to make money out of it. So, I mean, there are a lot of questions actually I have. For example, say, I I invested in a Wi-Fi company. Should I be very worried about the Wi-Fi will be replaced by the 5G? That kind of thing. Even today, I committed to invest in an electric car vehicle, company that we're trying to make Elon Musk of China. So, the numbers that we're talking about are huge, because in China you have essentially a marketplace as big as United States in terms of consumer that is even more. That I can see tremendous opportunity actually is in making money. But I personally never probably use any of these devices. So you created a new profession, probably investor, which maybe also causing this inequality. The 1%, 90% technology may have something contributing to that as well.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It's a very real issue. First of all, I would talk to the people running your Wi-Fi company and make sure they're investing in 5G or aware of it and understand how to plug into it, take advantage of it. But I think you're exactly right. Like, all of these businesses are going to make a lot of people a lot of money. Absolutely. And in Silicon Valley, all of the innovations in Silicon Valley, tremendous products that have come out. And a lot of good has been done for the world out of those tech companies. But they've been very good for investors and very good for founders. I think the case to say that they've been very good for the society at large is not as clear. And we are getting to the point where, I don't know if, I was going to say Facebook didn't put anybody out of work, but
Or the council should be very worried, or maybe it's even going to be worth more.
yeah, I don't think Facebook put anybody out of work, but it has completely disrupted the media industry. And there are lots of journalists that can't work because the media doesn't work the way it used to. Advertising business is not the way it used to. The only companies that grew, digital advertising grew by a lot last year. And Facebook and Google took all that money. More than 90% of all of the digital advertising money, all the growth last year went to Facebook and Google. Traditional media companies saw no growth. They saw losses. So that's great for Facebook and Google and for their investors, but it leads to the second tier consequences. I think you're right. I think there's lots of opportunities to make money, but understanding what the effect is on the economy at large and certainly the society, it's a lot. It seems to me to be more complicated.
Do you see a point in the future where individuals will have insight into the algorithms that are determining the content that's fed to them, and what is going to bring that about?
I don't think they will. And this is one of the things that's most frustrating. And you see this growing backlash against both AI and they're almost discrete questions. So one is that there are all these algorithms that affect our lives that we don't have any transparency or visibility into. And even the companies that make the algorithms often don't understand how they work. They're self-optimizing systems. When Mark Zuckerberg, that's true of AI in general. And when you talk about Facebook, which has an algorithm which decides what media gets put in front of you at what times. Mark Zuckerberg got up after the election and said he didn't think that Facebook had anything to do with the election. I believe him. I think he didn't think they did. I don't think he understood how his network worked. I don't think he understood how the algorithms were going to create these feedback loops. And most importantly, I don't think he understood that his platform was an advertising platform that could be accessed by anyone with money. And they could then use the targeting tools to create a system that they could create these consequences in these subsections. So I don't think the consumers are going to be able to, it's hard to make all of that available to the consumer. I do think there's some things you could do. You could hold social networks to the same standards as print media and broadcast media, so that when a political ad goes on Facebook, it has to have disclosure and say who bought that ad. I think that would help, and that might be something we could do. But I'm also a little encouraged that this larger conversation we're having about the algorithms that control our media feeds, like I've understood it for a long time. I've worked in digital media. We have advertisers on our site that we help to find audiences. We target users based on, if somebody's in the market for a laptop, we help target that user across the entire internet. That's part of what we do as a media company. So I sort of have an intuitive understanding of media targeting and digital advertising. The average American, I don't think, does. They know that ads follow them around the internet. But other than that, I don't think they really understand that it's not just the ads following you around the internet, it's really all of your content following you around the internet. And on Facebook, it's not your friends just sharing information with you. It's also you being exposed to content, which is you being part of a constant experiment to see what you will react to, for good or for worse. It could be stuff you hate, but if you react to it and you engage with it, Facebook's going to show you more of it, because that's the assumption built into their algorithm. And I don't know. We're just starting to have that conversation now, and people are starting to realize that there are people that are showing them things just to make them angry. And it's counterintuitive. Like, there are people that are because if you're angry, that means you're going to share it. You may like it, you may send it to somebody, and Facebook algorithm is optimizing for that because they want you to spend. It means you're going to spend more time on Facebook, and that's just the way the algorithm was built, because it's built by engineers that didn't necessarily think that was a bad thing. They were given a set of goals, and this is the algorithm they built to meet those goals, and it's been incredibly effective. Almost, I say absolutely, it's been scarily effective.
Will the law, or should the law catch up soon? Should innovators be responsible for bad AI?
There's a long way to go, but yeah, I mean, I think Sheryl Sandberg just did an interview last week in which once again we were, journalists tried to get her to admit that Facebook was a media company, and she wouldn't do it. They're just a platform. They're just a technology company. The truth of the matter is, Americans get more than 50% of their news from Facebook. 50%, just as a country. So Facebook doesn't write the stories, but and they think that distances themselves from it. But they certainly manage the distribution and provide the ad platform and target users. It seems to me there needs to be some kind of accountability. How that gets imposed, the regulation to me seems kind of ham-handed. Like, I don't know how it would work, but at the very least we need to educate people as to how it works and make people aware of the role of algorithms in our lives in general, because the algorithms are not innocent. They come with lots and lots of biases.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hi, Dan. Many thanks for your inspiring and interesting talk. I have a few questions for you. Today you mentioned AI and voice recognition, but you didn't say a word about robots. So I just want to know, what are the likely impact of robots to our daily life? That is my first question. And the second question is, will robots be intelligent enough to control and overtake human beings in the future? And also, I just come across a news in USA about a driverless car accident. Who is to blame?
Those are all good questions. Driverless cars do present certain legal issues. In the U.S., we had our first driverless car fatality in an accident last year. And it was a mistake. You could probably make a case that the passenger wasn't paying enough attention. But the car made a mistake, and it didn't recognize its environment fast enough, and it killed the passenger. It didn't kill anyone outside the car, but the person inside the car. And that's a failure. I mean, that's a failure on of the self-driving car technology. In aggregate, we found that self-driving cars are far safer than human-driven cars. Whether that aggregate doesn't necessarily help the family of the person that died or the lawyers that are going to sue for damages.
Is that legal in America?
It is legal. You could do test drives, and then the car that got into an accident was a Tesla, and it was in semi-autonomous mode. So you can use it. It's like smart cruise control. So it is legal to take your hands off the wheel, read a book, and let the Tesla drive on the highway.
That's legal.
That's legal. That's legal. And we haven't had a legal case to push the responsibility. We're going to, and we're going to have to. The other thing when we talk about AI and systems and biases, you're going to need to be able to program the car to make life and death decisions. So if somebody steers into your lane and you can either steer off the road and kill the driver, or you can steer into the other lane and kill the family of four that's innocent in the car next to you. Assume the car knows all these things, because it should, car-to-car communication. You need an algorithm to tell you which of those things is the right thing to do. So that needs to be decided by programmers. So there's that question that gets to that issue too. So I'm going to let the lawyers decide who's to blame. That's their job until the computers replace them. But then the other question about robots, I gotta say, I'm not worried about robots. I'm not worried about robots taking over the world. I'm more worried about AI taking over the world, and not taking over to create some super being that's going to tell us all what to do. It's a lot of different AIs and a lot of different algorithms that are just going to take some decision making away from us without our knowing it. And we see it happening with social media. I think it happens with in all segments of the world where we're offloading decision making to these systems. Most of the time that's an advantage, and we're better off for it, but not always. And so that's the AI systems that I'm worried about. The robots themselves, the robotics has done amazing things for our world in terms of manufacturing, in terms of efficiency. So the robots don't worry me. The AIs are a legitimate concern, and they don't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They look like bits of code, but the bits of code have more effect on our lives, and they're having an effect on our lives today, as opposed to the science fiction dystopias that we've watched in the movies.
Last question, anyone?
This might be a little dated, but I'm behind. But I'm curious. I heard a rumor from my little brother that my phone is listening to everything I say, and then it sends me ads and is spying on me. And I didn't believe it, and then I mentioned going to Hoi An, and I opened up my phone and there was an ad on YouTube for Hoi An travel. So are our phones listening to us, and what's the future of privacy like?
Yeah. So your phone is probably not listening to you. I'll say your phone's probably not listening to you. There is a confirmation bias that's happened. I've heard this story so many times, the exact same story. What probably happened is that you spoke about it, but you probably searched for it, or you wrote about it in an email. It might have been in an email, and therefore the email, like if you write something in Gmail, Gmail flags you, cookies you, and then you get put into a certain bucket as somebody that might be traveling, and that's probably the connection. It's probably not the microphone. So that's by default. At the same time, I'll tell you two other things, which is when Google launched its new Google Bot, it's a little speaker, it just came out last week. It was brand new, they just started shipping them, and the first, I don't know, a couple thousand that came off the line were shipped with a bug in the software it was accidentally recording everything that was going on and shipping all of that audio data back to Google. It was a mistake. They didn't do it on purpose, but it is a microphone. It's built to record things. And something inside in the firmware was just switched on instead of switched off. So the default was wrong. They pushed out an update. Now it doesn't do that anymore. But that's what it did. And it's not like anybody would have known for quite a while if it hadn't been fixed. And then the other more scary thing is, and again, I have to say, I'm not a representative of the United States government here, private citizen. It is a microphone, and our security apparatus, nation states have the capacity to turn on that microphone and record things. And that's just the presumption that it's not just the United States. Every government can probably do that. We're not in a world where advertisers are doing that yet. Corporations aren't doing that, but because it's not necessary to them, and there's no financial incentive in doing so. But you know, does the technology theoretically allow that to happen? Yes. And I certainly wouldn't put it past a large nation state with large, vast amounts of resources to be able to do something like that. But your phone's probably okay.
Applause for Dan Costa.